This is Shoshana. I'm here talking to my dear friend Marco Missinato, who is a beautiful being and an amazing composer, musician, and wisdom carrier. And we're just having a conversation here today about these times we're in right now. It seems that there's a lot of shift happening in our consciousness and on the planet. And Marco, thanks for being here on the planet. And
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for being here in the planet.
Yeah,
It's equally important.
it's true. And it's becoming more and more my pleasure to be here.
Isn't it?
Actually,
That's a good sign.
yeah.
It's a sign of awakening, if we want to use that term. Because as we more tune in with the experience, the more we find it delicious and wonderful. And we find out that this can be considered our home. It is our home for the time being.
Right, so perhaps the idea of suffering can be passé. I mean, we have this human experience, and there's, people who have loved ones who are sick or dying, and, the experience of what we call suffering on this planet. And yet, it seems, the question that's arising for me right now is, do our souls actually suffer? Or what suffers? Who suffers?
Well, in my perception, there is a difference between pain and suffering. So pain is just pain. And at this moment, sooner or later, we are going to experience small doses of large doses of pain, physical pain usually. It's also emotional pain. But pain becomes suffering when we start to make a dramatic issue about it. When we start to build a story around the pain, then the pain becomes suffering.
Mm-hmm.
That's my personal way to see it. So we can have a headache or some problem, some pain, and we can make a huge deal about it and feel victim about it and feel sorry about ourselves. And or we can say, okay, we are having pain right now, it's an experience, without over dramatize the whole thing. And but yes, pain is part of the experience at this moment. It might vanish as we proceed through the self-remembering process, and our DNA get more activated, and all our antennas start to work properly. Then we probably won't experience any more pain.
So it seems that many and the planet are in a process of awakening and remembering. And as the old is falling away, it's coming up, it's bubbling up, it's kind of like a detox reaction. So not to get stuck in the suffering or the pain or the discomfort that might be associated with that.
Yeah. The process of self-remembering, it's an ongoing thing in my perception. I never completely stop the act of remembering more who I am, because it's an occurring that takes place when we experience life fully. But in the last years, even the last months or even the last weeks, it started to become more, let's say, supported by so many situations. And so we are living a more intensified version of the process of self-remembering at this time. And therefore, with the self-remembering, when we start to remember certain things, we inevitably start to let go of things that don't fit anymore the picture of how we perceive reality. So there is a lot of let go that needs to occur. And the part that is attached to those parameters, usually it's the ego, sometimes struggle with that letting go and try to find all kind of reasons why we shouldn't. We should still be attached to the old parameters. And most of these reasons are fear-based, are scarcity-based, are based on parameters that are not organic, but they are illusionary fear-based.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious what you have to say about the process of what we call healing. You know, it keeps coming up. I'm hearing people say, "Oh, I'm healing this, and I just need to heal."
Yeah, I never really subscribe fully to the idea of healing. I've been doing many healing modalities in my past, but I never really fully subscribe to it. I think if, as my friend Franco says very eloquently, if we shift the idea of an experience that we need to heal from as just an experience more than creating a story out of it, because the story is what creates the needs of healing, is a story. So we can always, the good news is we can always rewrite our story. And rewriting our story doesn't require healing, doesn't require long-term processes of healing and healing this and healing that. But that's my personal experience. Some people have a different opinion about it. So no, I don't go much into healing. I just go into appreciation of what the experience was, and the experience itself, the appreciation of the experience itself. It's enough to let go of the story and transform and move on.
Right, because people will get stuck in the story and keep rehashing the story and dwelling on the story, and they're like on a hamster wheel.
Yeah. But sometimes it can be useful healing as a permission slip, as a way to, because sometimes we have symptoms and we don't know what the story is about these symptoms, right? So some process of healing might help us to remember the story, and once we remember the story, now we have the choice to invest more time, more of our attention to the story, or change the story.
Right, so it seems that it's really a matter of what we think about something and how we perceive it in our mind, perhaps.
Yeah, when we think, when we have thoughts or we have feelings or emotions, I think is a healthy things to do is to ask, okay, who is having this thought? Is my soul? Is my heart? Or is my ego? Is my ego mind? Or is my soul? Or is my body? You know? So you tune in and you ask the question, and then you will know. And if it's the ego, now you know that it's just a fear-based storyteller in order for it to slow you down, because that's what the ego is for. It's a storyteller that all it wants is to slow down your evolution and actually maybe even regress your evolution to de-evolution. That's what the ego is made for. So you can tune in and really connect with your heart and soul and ask the question, and then most likely you will hear something back.
So some people say that the ego serves a purpose, that there's a healthy ego. Perhaps that's not what I'm hearing you say. If no ego, then what? What is there?
No, ego serves a purpose. Serve a purpose to create a contractive experience, which is a very valuable experience. But we are navigating towards a time in our journey where those kind of contractive experiences are not needed anymore. And so the ego is eventually, gradually vanishing. And the soul will start to take fully charge of our vehicle, so that when we when we make a decision or take an action, has a pure intent, not an intent that is based on fear, on lack, on separation, on polarity, on fragmentation. You know, is a decision that comes from oneness, from a unity field, not from polarity. And that's what things start, when things start to really change in our physical experience. It's like humanity has been in a container for about, I don't know, 10,000 years, and now is so associated, is so identified with the idea of being inside a container, but it believes that there is nothing else. Or maybe some have some ideas, but they think that's reality. So they are very accustomed to this kind of very contractive and tight container, and now the container right now is gradually and rapidly falling apart. And that can be very scary, because we are so in our miserable comfort zone that we don't want to let go of that, and it scared us. Just the idea that there is an alternative, it really scares us.
It's familiar.
Yeah. So, but this is all coming from the ego. The soul doesn't have any concern about that. He just say, okay, let's bring it on. Let's move on with this, because it's time. Exciting, you know. The soul doesn't understand fear.
So, as we're having this conversation, both of us are in a purification process for our physical body temples. I would love for you to speak a bit more about the importance and how that serves right now to purify in every level, including our physical bodies.
Well, yeah, of course, as usual, I can talk only about me personally. I cannot say that this must be true for everyone, but of course, the more I intensify my focus in what is relevant to me in the creative process of life, the more I need a body that works efficiently. And so the more I feel like I need to provide whatever is needed for the body to thrive. And we are already in a situation where there's so much pollution on many levels, and so I think it's a good thing to do, to clean up and to change some habits, allowing the body to adjust to the idea that food is an addiction for the most, and the immense quantity of food that we ingest every day on a regular basis are not coming from the desire of the body or having so much matter to process. It's more an addiction of the mind. It's more like a program. We've been programmed to believe that we need to eat 3, 4, 5 times a day, all kind of food. In reality, food is at the foundation of everything that is calcification, inflammation, and aging, along with stress and emotional stress. I think food is really at the foundation of why we are aging and why we are gasping for energy all the time, why we are always sick, why we experience pain, physical pain. It's mostly because we ingested a lot of food that is not necessary, and so it creates mucus, particularly the cooked food, and then the food cannot be enter and almost never exit, and it attached to every internal layers of our body and calcify, inflames and create inflammation and calcification, and that's from where all the diseases and aging factor come from. So the good news is that no matter what stage you are in your calcification or aging process, the body is such a miracle and incredible intelligence that you always can find ways to reset the body to a point of even rejuvenated, you know. So, but in order to do that, you have to be open to follow your internal wisdom more than the wisdom that comes from the outside, because at this point I think it's obvious for most of the people that whatever comes from outside is not necessarily for our best interest. It's actually mostly a way to it's monetary, business related industry that tell us to take medicines, and there is also other reasons why things like that happen. So there is no, it's obvious. For example, this is another thing that I don't understand, why it's not obvious. If I go to visit somebody that is introduce himself as a health expert, I expect to see somebody that is extremely healthy.
Yes.
I expect to see somebody that is amazingly, strikingly beautiful and full of vitality and full of energy, and he looks like 30 years younger, and you know.
Are you speaking of doctors?
I'm talking about, of course, doctors, whoever claim to be a master in his craft. I expect to see a master. But if you notice, most of the time you go to the doctor, actually sometimes I see people that are more sick than me. So something doesn't make sense, right?
Yes.
So that's a obvious signal that we might need, at this point we really need to make our own researches and really look within ourselves and connect with our soul, and it will guide us to whatever process is necessary for us to bring the body to a higher level of health. In fact, we need to tune in straight with the body, because the body has an amazing intelligence. And if we can somehow sort out all our emotional addictions and all the confusing signal of the ego, and we can stay in a state of appreciation and stillness, and then from that appreciation and stillness we connect with the body will tell us what is needed, what he needs in order to get better, or as you said before, heal, you know.
And as the body is purifying and removing toxic chemicals or even toxic thoughts, you know, because if we eat, sometimes we eat, as you said, as you know, habitually, just to suppress certain emotions. So when we start purifying, we have the opportunity to allow these emotions to come to the light, and as we spoke about earlier with the concept of healing, change our relationship with that particular thought or emotion, bring it to the light and release it. So as our bodies become purified, how do you feel that affects our journey as a soul in these bodies?
Well, the body, when it's clean, of course, allows the signal that comes from the soul to be perceived more rapidly and more directly and more deeply and deeper, more deeply. While when we are full of sugar, full of caffeine, alcohol, drugs, or toxic food, the voice of the soul almost cannot be heard. Also, our devices, if they are not clean, cannot receive the signals of our part of ourselves that is in a higher level of consciousness or other level of appreciation. We cannot hear those signals because we are congested with mucus and with all kind of stuff, including viruses, negative bacteria, fungus, and all this kind of stuff needs to be evacuated from the body. And then when the body is clean, then the messages of our higher self come much more powerfully.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's true, because one of the things that I'm passionate about doing is helping people to heal their gut or their microbiome. And there's so many different creatures, bacteria that live, that many of them are maybe not beneficial, and they're ruling the roost. They're the ones that are telling us, eat that sugar, or go, get that processed food, or whatever it might be, drink that, alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we purify, then we get to really connect with a higher source.
Mm.
Yes, that which is like more in line with our well-being and for our life. That's pro-life. It's probiotics for life. In our gut. Yeah.
Yeah, it also depends the story that you have behind those bad food, because you see, if you enter a diet or a healthy program because you think it's bad, then the body says, okay, it's all well and good that you give me healthy food, but your philosophy behind it is not coming from neutrality, it's not coming from unconditional love. You have a judgment about it, and so that is not going to work. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's important to become vegan, or to become whatever is in resonance with your system, whatever your body tells you to do, but without a judgment about it. So you discharge your emotional charge, you let go of the emotions and the judge about the bad and good, and then from that point of view you start to do things because it feels good to you, because your body is telling you that, without the judgment. Then the diet might work, and that's why many times these changes for better nutrition fail, because we have a judgment about it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and not to necessarily advocate this, but I've met teachers, Buddhist teachers, monks who are very advanced, who, in their 90s, whatnot, smoking cigarettes. Mm-hmm. So the non-judgment thing of that might be right for someone, that might work for someone, that might be their path.
Yes. It really is the label that you put on something that creates the experience. Because everything is neutral, the way how you respond it creates the experience. So if you respond to the situation with a negative or fear-based attitude, most likely you get negative results. But in a way you can say that if you have a neutral predisposition towards something that is called bad, you might neutralize it. Now, some people, for example, I don't need to experience smoking in my life. I am completely indifferent. I don't have any fascination about smoking. So in my case, I don't smoke because there is no resonance for me at all about the idea of smoking. But there are some people that maybe for many reasons, past lives, whatever, they need to experience that. And then once we experience that, depending on how is their emotional predisposition, that become little or become neutral, And so that's why some people smoke all their life and seems like everything is okay. But it's also that it's very debatable to me. It depends what you mean. Define what is okay. Define what is health to you. I mean, you have to, because again, some people say, my grandfather smoked for all his life and he's 95 years old. Yeah, but what kind of consciousness he has? Mm-hmm. How is the quality of his life? Is he really joyful, or is life, has reached a level of maturity internal? As you raise your level of consciousness, there are certain things you just don't do. Every time you smoke, you basically you give a harsh kick on your pulmon or lungs. That's how you call them in English, lungs, right? So why a high conscious person would do that to his body? What is the reason? Because if you are addicted to the smoke, then you are not high conscious, obviously, because there is an addiction there. So in that department, smoking, you still have some work to do, right? But if you are, if you raise a certain level of consciousness, certain things just don't belong to you anymore. You don't need to experience those, you know.
Right.
They just vanish naturally as you progress into the journey. Like there are so many things that I don't need to experience by now, that I don't have any fascination about in my journey. And that's beautiful because what is relevant to me, it narrowed down more and more, and so I become more and more focused on what is really, really relevant for my personal evolution and my work of support, rather than being constantly distracted by so many things that are, yeah, there are experiences, but they are not particularly relevant to why I came into this physical experience in the first place, right? That's mostly ego stuff that want us to be constantly distracted. And so as you move forward in your awareness, in your remembering, things that don't belong anymore, you know, start to vanish. And that's what we said at the very beginning of this interview, where we need to let go of things, and the ego has an attachment to it, and so then we will have to develop the ability to discern when is the ego talking and when is the soul talking. You know, some people don't know that they are not able to do that just yet, and once we have the ability to discern, then we can make it a choice that is more resonance for us.
Do you have any tips on how to discern when it is the ego, when it is the soul? Sometimes it's super obvious, and other times it's really subtle.
Yeah. It is a challenge. I think stillness helps a lot. So when we align with the moment, with the present, usually it takes a while, but eventually those voices based on anxiety, on fear, start to be more easy to identify, because they don't take you all. Because you cannot be in your ego and be present. It's impossible. It's impossible to be in your ego and be present in the now. That's why the ego constantly talks to you, because it doesn't want you to stay in that space. You know, between one thought and the other thought, there is a space, right? In that space, that's where your truth is. And the ego doesn't want that. That's why it keeps talking to you. So, communion with nature, for example, help a lot. Stillness, meditation, what people call meditation, helps a lot. The creative process helps a lot. Those are things that can help. Love making can help when it's pure. So these are the things that help you to start to discern, to be able to discern what is your real voice and what is the voice of the ego.
So, if the ego lived somewhere in the body, would you say that the ego resided in our mind, in our mental processes? Because there's a lot of awareness about dropping from the mind into the heart. And as you were sharing tips to discern the ego and the soul, what came to me is perhaps really dropping in and listening to our heart. I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, okay, we need to, I think, I'm not an expert in these things because I'm an artist more than anything else, but in my perception, we confuse the mind from the ego mind. The mind is a wonderful, powerful tool that we have at our disposal. The ego mind is different. It's an implant. It's something that is being planted, a certain point in our journey, we decided to increase the challenges of our physical experience, and so we started to create situations that make it more difficult. And with this idea, we created the ego, which is literally an implant, which is manufactured in a way so that we are it's more difficult for us to master the art of be fully ourselves. It's basically is a destructive device that we have in our system, and this device is connected with the matrix and with the artificial intelligence. They are built to talk to each other in order for us to have a very, very challenging experience, very powerful experience. So now this experience the process of this experience is completed. We collectively decided now that it's time to go back to the original blueprint of our physical experience, which is an experience with no ego and many other things.
What do you feel the reason for that experience?
The reason of the matrix and the ego?
Yeah.
Well, from what I understand is we decided to make the game more difficult because we are very powerful beings, and
just to have an experience.
Yeah, to make it more challenging, more interesting, more. It's like when you play a game and you are already a master. After a while, you say, "Okay, let's make the game a little more difficult, right?"
So are we bored with the game now? Is that why we're switching things up now?
We are bored? No, we are not bored. It's just that I think we had enough. I think whatever the reason why this experience was created are completed. And it is time for us to return to our original plan.
Which seems like it would be a whole lot more fun.
Much more fun, much more loving, much more beautiful. And in fact, this, from what I understand, still from my friend Franco De Nicola, I understand that this physical experience in its organic 3D form, which we are entering right now, we are actually, the planet is already in an organic 3D form. We are deprogramming ourselves, and as we deprogram, we fit more and more the new organic Earth. But this 3D organic experience, which was the original blueprint of our physical experience, now is being upgraded. So we are going to have an experience we never had before, and we are going to have the opportunity to really have the experience of what it means to be humans.
So perhaps returning to love, as I was speaking earlier about the heart, I think when we are abiding in love, there is not the separation, there's not the polarity, there's not the hierarchy, there's oneness.
Yeah.
It's recognizing you are I and I am you, and we all come from the same place.
Yeah.
We're all in this together.
Yeah, the subject of love also is can be very tricky, because we have been programmed to a love that is not really the organic love. So also that needs to be shifting, as to we need to remember what really love is, because right now the association of love, the idea of love is associated with so many things that are not really organic. Actually, they are fear-based. So that also needs to be reevaluated.
Would you say that organic love would be same as unconditional love?
Well, I personally, and that's, I don't know, I'm just talking about from my personal discovery at this moment, and it might change tomorrow, but I associate the idea of love with freedom. So if there is a differentiation between love and freedom, then love is not real love, because the love that in my perception is real, it frees you. It doesn't cages you. It doesn't have any condition. It doesn't tell you you're wrong, you're right. It allows you to be whatever you need to be. And so when you are loved in that way, you even expand even more your sense of freedom, which for many people can be scary, because we are so upside down and so messed up that even the idea of freedom is scary, right?
Absolutely.
So that kind of love can be scary for many.
I might ask you to do this, but I'm wondering, you're sitting right in front of a baby grand piano. Maybe you can play a little something for us.